All right. Good morning, everyone. This is County Executive Pat Ryan, and really excited to have County Executive Mark Molinaro join us.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for being here, Mark.
You're welcome. We were joking before that I think we talk more to each other than our spouses.
Yeah.
And this is probably the first time we've been in a room, although somewhat socially distant, in weeks. So
My wife keeps asking, who's this Mark guy that keeps texting you late at night? So
true. My wife says, "What? Really, Jake? What do you wear?" Khakis and a polo shirt.
So no, I will say, I mean, we work together on a lot of issues, but to see yourself as well, County Executive Steve Newhouse down in Orange County, we have been almost by the hour communicating and coordinating, and that's been really helpful for me, and I think by extension for everybody. So
yeah. No, I agree. And honestly, I think the community, the region, should be satisfied and comforted to know that we're interacting that regularly, whether it's sharing thoughts, confronting new challenges, or even sharing resources. It's ongoing. So the 3-4 counties of this region have been working really well together. And, in a time of uncertainty, at least that is certain.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a time you've been a local government leader almost basically your whole life. So
yes, yeah.
You know this much more than me, but in a time where there's been a lot of uncertainty and sometimes not action at the national level, local government has really stepped up. So It's great.
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep pounding the table. I'll stop doing that.
Oh,
for
did I do
everybody
that
listening.
as well? I could be careful. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm Italian. I'm moving my hands is sort of natural.
So why don't we? What we'll do is we'll dive in. If you want to give any, I have a few updates on just what's going on in Ulster.
Sure.
If you want to give any updates, and then we'll open it up to Q&A.
Yeah. So Dutchess now has what we've identified as 35 positive identified cases, and we continue to remind people, and I think it's important to understand that while knowing positive cases is a value, we have to function as if everyone in our community, and I've heard you say something similar, everyone in our community has either contracted or has come into contact with somebody who has contracted COVID.
Right.
And the reason that's important is it'll help us change our behavior, but also be less concerned about which block someone lives on, which is it's real. There are a lot of social, privacy, personal issues, but also it'll have us focus more effectively on treating those who are ill. So that's our case count. The county today opens our 24-hour shelter, which we're making available food, housing for those who might be displaced. Certainly we have a homeless population that already had impact, but because of what is substantial now, either unemployment or lack of housing security, we have opened our 24/7 shelter. It's on North Hamilton Street in Poughkeepsie. That's also functioning as a hub for us, so we're able to share resources from there out to other providers. Later today, you'll find at dutchessny.gov our Dutchess Responds effort, similar, I think, to your Project Resilience, which is this concept of obviously trying to weave together all of the support structure that's out there.
Yeah.
A lot of infrastructure, a lot of pantries and community organizations, but also an opportunity to contribute. And I know that you've been successful in identifying donors. We'll be in the same boat. So Dutchess Responds will appear at dutchessny.gov. There'll be an opportunity for folks to volunteer. And, of course, we want to remind folks that if they have questions, they should reach out to 845-486-3555 is the Dutchess County hotline. And at that number, you'll be able to contact us either for questions, comments, concerns, but also to volunteer and to be directed toward volunteering.
And I know we've had a few questions about we can talk more about this. I'll give a few updates. But we've had a few questions
I was doing high level.
No. That's good. That's good. I got excited. I was going to dive in. But
I should say this though. Listen, I have had 25 years in law, and I hope people don't mind us laughing because I've been I've actually been on the radio in the morning saying to DJs, if you haven't already been funny, you should start now. I mean, the public does deserve a little bit of relaxing. But I've had 25 years in local government, and responding to emergencies does start locally and then goes globally. You gave your life in service, and actually, I do think your residents need to know that military background has been of value. I think organizing government, and we've stolen some of your ideas.
Same.
I mean, listen, I have a government approach. You certainly have a life experience, but I think the military background should provide some comfort to your residents to know that there's sort of a structure, there's an order to how you respond to these things. And many days I feel a little bit like I think I would call myself a field general. I don't know if that's the right title, but nevertheless, the governor having a different title. But I do think that experience is of value to your residents, and I know that we appreciate tapping into that as well. Almost everybody in your government is exceptionally capable.
Almost. Our team has been incredible, and I'll just say too, beyond this crisis, from literally the first day I started as a county executive, knowing not nearly enough about this role, you've been an incredible resource. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So just a few Ulster County updates, and then we're getting questions coming in, and please keep them coming on Facebook. First, Ulster County updates in terms of positive cases. We did see a significant increase. We were at 9 yesterday. We're now at 13 confirmed positive. I absolutely echo what Mark said in terms of that's just who we've been able to test. And I've talked consistently about our need and our emphasis on ramping up testing, and we are working that. I imagine we're getting some questions about that, so we can talk more about that. We can put out through the press and others additional details about where those are. But at the high level, just in terms of those 13, we're not sharing personal information. We are sharing town information. 4 in the town of Rochester, 2 in Shongum, 1 in Esopus, 2 in Lloyd, 1 in town of Ulster, 2 in Saugerties, and 1 in New Paltz. The 2 new additional are New Paltz and Saugerties. So that's the update there. Again, really trying to move away from thinking about those numbers, but I understand that people do want to know what those numbers are, and we're working on that. A few other just updates, which many of these affect everybody in the state. So we know yesterday the governor gave direction to private businesses to have a goal of 75% of their workforce, if they're not already closed, working remotely. So I just wanted to reemphasize that. There was a new update this morning. Hair and nail salons, barbers, and tattoo shops across the tri-state region, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, were directed to be closed, and we had actually had some questions already on that, so there's a little more clarity there. On the kind of economic front, and I know many people are feeling more and more financial pressure and crunch. A few resources available. Yesterday, Dutchess was already approved, so well done. But yesterday we learned now Ulster County and the rest of New York State is approved for SBA, federal SBA loans up to $2 million. Our economic development team, and I know yours, are standing up to start answering and helping people through the paperwork there. Mortgage relief from the state was provided for 90 days if you can show need and impact from COVID-19. Evictions are off the table.
Suspended.
Yeah. That's huge. And then the federal government this morning announced the tax filing deadline. Everybody's favorite day, April 15th, is now pushed to July 15th, and Congressman Delgado was on here yesterday saying they were working on that, and I know he pushed that. So thanks to him and all of our federal leaders for giving everybody some more breathing room there. And then the last update I have on our Project Resilience effort continues to go well. We had a lot of significant donations coming in overnight. Encourage you all, if you're able to contribute financially or sign up to volunteer. It's on ulstercountyny.gov/Project Resilience. We continue to have now several hundred needs identified through our form. Over 60 restaurants participating, and I know more are calling every day. So thank you, everybody. I do think, to see the community mobilize. To see, even despite some of the isolation, people talking to each other in ways that they haven't in a while, and just saying, "Hey, how you doing? Hey, how you doing?" That's kind of it's encouraging, at least.
It is. It's actually kind of, in some ways, it's not only heartening, but it's funny in that this isolation has created an environment where we're actually getting closer to one another. And the good thing is we have the tools, right? So whether it's technology or just the good old-fashioned phone or yelling across the street to your neighbor, checking in is actually something that people are doing. We saw folks putting up Christmas lights or holiday lights.
Really?
Yeah, it's sort of a thing now
cool.
to kind of celebrate hope and give some opportunity.
I like that.
I know that we have a question coming in, but you had mentioned the private business closures and the 75% order by the governor. I think it's a good time to also remind remind people, the governor's expectation, as is all of ours, is not to find ways to keep people to come to work. So even if you are deemed essential, and there are a lot of businesses under the governor's order that are deemed essential, a lot of them, which is understandable until we know how to function in this environment. There are services that we have to at least acknowledge are. Right. But that said, even if you are deemed essential, still the goal is to reduce the number of people who report to work. Right. So what we've said internally to our staff, and I think private business needs to understand this as well, this isn't a drill, this is real. Yeah. And secondly, the goal is to find ways to get people to work from home. So if that is turning off the phones and sort of having that to transfer to somebody's private cell or that sort of thing, you need to try to do that with your staff and don't look for excuses to keep people in the office. Now, I understand that burden. We all do. I mean, we recognize it. I mean, unemployment is going to continue to rise. How we bounce back is going to be certainly on everyone's mind. But again, the goal is to keep people at home. So find ways to be selfless and creative in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know for our government workforce, we've had to get creative with. We now have less than 50% of our workforce physically at work. We've gotten our IT department has stepped up in an incredible way, and I want to thank them for that. I'm sure yours has too. Across the country, IT departments are figuring out new solutions,
the new heroes.
Although I will say, having worked at tech companies previously, a lot of this remote work technology has been out there. So in some ways, again, this will force us to use new approaches where possible.
Absolutely.
So you said you had some questions.
There was a specific question regarding what's considered essential and not essential. I know we had a question regarding utilities, and why don't you repeat what we know from the governor's orders regarding? I mean, there's limited, but on utility service, lack of shutoffs, that sort of thing. I know you were talking about it.
Yeah, and we are trying. I don't have it for this session, and we'll put it out as soon as we get it officially. We've been talking extensively with Central Hudson. They have been fantastic. I know at a minimum they're allowing a grace period on utility bill payments. I'm trying to get an exact number of day window there, and I know that will start adding up for folks. Sure. So I'm sorry we don't have that specifically. If anybody from Central Hudson is watching and you want to do it live, you can. But we'll share that out on through all our channels as soon as we get that.
Right. And public utilities, whether it's water or electric, gas, they're all attempting to make that available. Yeah. And I don't think there's anybody who wants to shut anyone off. Right. The goal here is to provide some relief. Of course, you also want to be cognizant of the fact that when you put off payments, you don't want to be in the position of, come September, October, having to make a massive payment. So how the federal government and the local governments deal with that in the future is certainly an open question. But
yeah. I got one if you want
to jump on it. It's your show. I'm just visiting.
So we're getting a lot of questions about the mobile testing sites. I know both of us have been working in our teams pretty much nonstop to get these up. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you guys are thinking?
Sure.
We don't, same as you, we don't have all the details ironed out, but we're feeling good about Monday being able to at least have what I'll call a soft launch.
Yes.
Of a test.
We feel we're in the same boat. As you know, we're working together with a couple providers to prop up mobile testing, keeping in mind that the State Department of Health has to sign off on those locations. And of course, we want to have access to resources. We don't want to open a testing site and then not be able to continue that. So we're very similar. We have a location we've identified regionally in Dutchess County. I'll hold off on acknowledging where that is, only because it's so regional that we can't have folks lining up. But the expectation, so people understand, is that at least in our side of the river, the expectation will be that you'll call in to make an appointment, and then not make an appointment, be advised that you can come in at a particular time, and that's really to minimize traffic and certainly individuals just sort of lining up to get tested. So the goal is a mobile unit, a mobile testing facility. It will have reasonable capacity. We expect to be able to announce that and have it operational early next week. And we've been doing this with Ulster. So the expectation is that at least 2 of the 3 locations, Ulster, Dutchess, that will be identified, will be regionally beneficial to both counties. Right. And we expect next week to have those operational. But we should say, and I'll say it whether you want to or not. One. Listen, this country was slow in getting that up and running. There's a reality with a decentralized medical system that we have to confront, certainly moving forward. The other is, really as a community, and we talk about this regarding positive cases, it's important to know if you've contracted COVID, but it is important to know if you can weather that and sort of manage that on your own, meaning that you have to begin by triaging yourself. And just as you would with a cold or a flu, there are certain things you know. You know if your body's in distress. You know if you're of higher risk than others. But the truth is, if you contract it, most people will be able to weather most of the disease. And to flood the system, whether it's testing sites or healthcare facilities, is not helpful either to you or anyone else. And we need to be able to respond to what will likely be a surge of severe cases that the system has to deal with. Mayor de Blasio, and I'll stop, but Mayor de Blasio announced this morning, this concept of, the surge in the city and that they're considering sort of a stay in place or stay at home concept. That will likely mean that people will come up north.
Exactly.
So, it's important, I think, that we all understand that the system is going to be flooded, whether it's, sort of full-time residents, part-time residents, or just because other systems won't have the support. So again, triage yourself. Understand that in most cases, being tested might provide you a soundness of mind, but it may not always be necessary.
Right. And that exactly. And just to beat the dead horse for 5 more seconds.
I didn't want to put words in your mouth.
No.
I mean, that's sort of our
So
approach.
Luke specifically on Facebook asked, will you only test the high-risk folks or anyone who has symptoms? So you really kind of alluded to that. I mean, we're asking everybody, of course, you think about yourself and your family, but we're asking everybody to think about the community and do that work to assess and triage. We don't have all the tests we need. We've been saying that. We've been transparent about that. There's a lot of reasons for it, but the reality is that's where we are, and we're working to ramp that up locally and nationally. But in the meantime, when we open up next week at our testing sites, we inevitably will not be able, especially the first day, to get to everybody who would ideally want to test. So we're asking people to be patient and prioritize. We're getting another question from Caitlin. What is the next step for schools?
You want to take a stab? You and I talked with Orange County to make that initial step, and we believed, and rightfully so, that school closures made sense at that time. I think we both agreed 2 weeks was logical. I think we also agreed that 2 weeks was not going to be the maximum. So since then, of course, the governor took action, and rightfully so. There's a statewide action now, and of course they would like to act as in unison as possible. But I would expect, if I'm advising my own family and other families, that the month of April is likely not going to be a school month. We initially thought internally that we could go as long as into it entirely inclusive of May. There's some indication, and Dr. Fauci from the federal government was on this morning talking about this. We're looking at a 4 to 8 week period based on what they know in other countries, and that's likely the window, if not the minimum window.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I know that there are many parents home right now that may not be excited to hear that, but we're trying to be as transparent as we can. We don't know, but I think that's a reasonable assumption that we would look at extending that.
And both of us have resources online, and I know that you've encouraged folks to visit social media platforms to get this. But listen, creating structure, as hard as that is for anyone to kind of become the school teacher, if you're not the school teacher, creating structure is important. A schedule to some degree with your kids is probably helpful. I know this sounds...
How many do you have?
I have 4. Yeah. That said, I will tell you, my wife is, I mean, our wives are sainted. But she's attempting to kind of work through that schedule. But I think families should know that. And also, there are resources online that you should lean on. There are teachers and academics who are providing coursework online. Schools themselves locally are providing some assistance. And, of course, there are others, from actors and actresses to artists and others who are kind of doing online work that you can kind of, as a young person, interact and take part in. It's probably also a good point to remind people that even though it's a little cold today and it's likely to potentially snow on Monday, I don't know who we angered, but nevertheless, to try to get outside to the extent that you can keep that limited, obviously, and not have that social interaction. It's important to continue to get that outside activity, if only for sanity.
Yeah, we're trying to get our walk in for sure. So 2 related questions we're getting about unemployment and people that are in some stage of uncertainty from their employers. So one is just how do people apply for unemployment, and then that was from Francis. A related question from Shannon: can employers force you to use all of your time off during a mandatory quarantine? This will leave people with no time off for the rest of the year and then put them at risk for write-ups and being fired. So I don't know. I'll start with the first half of that, which is a little more direct. Unemployment insurance is a critical resource. Right now, if you are unemployed, okay, we have an update coming in. We'll share in a second here. If you are unemployed, you go to the New York State unemployment website through the Department of Labor. Unfortunately, earlier this week, so many people went on the first day that it actually crashed temporarily. But you can go and fill out your paperwork there. They online or paper. They have waived the 7-day period, so that gives you a little more flexibility. If you're having problems, though, with the state website, that's really what our teams are here to help with. Our Office of Employment and Training, which is really focused on the workforce, they're incredible. I know yours is as well. They're standing up as part of our overall kind of economic team between supporting businesses and supporting workers and working families. So that you can call the Ulster County Office of Employment and Training, or Dutchess. We have all those numbers up on our website, ulstercountyny.gov, and dutchessny.gov is Dutchess County. But the counties really do fill that critical role. If you're not getting what you need from the state, they're doing their best, but they're overloaded. You can always come to us. I don't know if you have thoughts on the second half of that.
Remind me the second half of that.
The second half was: can employers force you to use all of your time off during a mandatory quarantine?
Again, I'm doing this now from recollection. The state order, I thought, and the federal government were adopting language to provide, I think, two weeks of sort of free, not free, but paid leave.
Paid leave,
for,
right.
And that's been enacted? That's real.
That has been enacted. Congressman Delgado confirmed that yesterday.
Okay, so the only question that I still had, and I don't know if there's, maybe you know the answer and I don't, which is that quarantine? Is that I'm positive, or is that I just don't feel well? I don't think we know that answer.
I don't want to give the wrong information.
Fair enough. So
we'll get an answer on this question. I don't want to. It's a very important question. I know there are a lot of people in that situation, so we'll get that answer and put it out to everybody.
Sure, but I know in our case, of course, we're sort of treating it somewhat the same way. I mean, we have either essential workforce working at home or working still in offices, and we're sort of we're waiving any real penalty on compensatory time because we just need you working.
Yeah, and we're making sure all of our folks are being paid full through and to support their family.
So we had some updated information.
Yeah, do you want to share that?
From the governor's office today? Governor Cuomo is announcing that 100% of non-essential workforce should stay home. And whether or not you're deemed essential, I know that the governor's website and, of course, both of our websites have updated.
List, right?
There's a list. I will offer to you that it is a pretty extensive list, and I think that what we should all be prepared for is that list will continue to shrink over time.
Right.
So for now, if you're non-essential, 100% of the workforce, private non-essential workforce, needs to work from home and stay home. I personally would ask our employers, to the extent that they can afford it, to minimize the impact.
Yeah.
Certainly, there's no question there's going to be significant unemployment, but if you can afford to manage your staff and have them work from home, please do that before you make the decision, perhaps to sever employment.
And I know I've talked to many CEOs and business leaders that are trying their best. I mean, many of them keeping folks on as long as they can. We know that can't go on forever, but whatever relief you can provide. I am confident that, we don't know all the details, but at the federal level, that there is relief definitely coming, to individual families and also through business loans. And in terms of essential, I think there's going to be a lot of questions about this.
Yeah.
That list of essential, and I do not like that word, but it's the word that they're using, includes things like healthcare workers, first responders, grocery store workers, who I know have had a lot of concerons.
There are still transportation and distribution. Some manufacturers remain in that case, certainly. And I think if you followed the actions at the federal level, the president enacting sort of the War Powers Act, the concept, I'm sure, with some of the manufacturers will be, as prolonged as this becomes, is to convert some of those facilities into service, sort of like we experienced all those years ago during World War II.
Defense production. Act
Yes,
is
yeah,
powerful
yeah, yes.
legislation.
That's right. I said World Powers Act.
So I'm
Thank
glad
you.
that
Yes,
it's up, but now we actually need to
Yeah,
use it. I mean,
yeah.
so.
Yeah. The other is, I know we're getting a lot of questions, and I don't know that I don't either of us have this answer. Although I will tell you that with 2 dogs at home, I've had this question, and that is: are groomers, pet groomers, vets, and what have you considered essential? I'm going to say with the governor's new order, that's likely not the case.
I think that's a safe bet. But
Yeah. Yesterday it wasn't. Yesterday, remember, there was still you could still have barbers and hairdressers and even groomers. But I know that people care deeply about their pets, as do I.
We do.
So that's a question. I'm going to expect that is not considered an essential position or job, and frankly, we'll likely have to live by that 100% order. But we'll get more information for you.
On the pet note, my wife will want me to say this. I know our SPCA, and I imagine others, are putting out calls that if you are able to foster animals for even a short period of time, there are animals that will be, they're seeing reduced numbers of foster pets. So, Rebecca, if you're watching, I'm putting in the plug for we have 2 foster cats already, and we were looking at more. So, but if anybody is able to do that, that's a way you could help out on our all the critters we have running around, the creatures.
Well, and if we're giving shout outs to our spouses in that vein, my wife would I just would tell you though, my wife said if the dog doesn't get a haircut, Mark doesn't get a haircut.
Oh, nice,
so this is it.
All right. So on a more serious note, here's one from Beth. Is the stimulus check, and I'm assuming you're talking, Beth, about the federal stimulus check or checks that have been discussed, is this real, or is it going to be another news media bluff? Families could really use it, and many are struggling daily before this, but now it's worse. Is there any way people will be able to find out when or if they qualify? I've heard 2 checks, one in April and then reevaluated 6 weeks later. I know Congressman Delgado is doing another teletown hall for all the 11 counties in his congressional district
tonight
at 6:30. I think we're both going to be on that as well. He may have more updates at that time, and I know he's sharing that information about when that is. Quick answer is we don't know. I mean, from what I'm hearing from him and others that I know down in D.C., this seems to be pretty real, and I think it's actually unprecedented that for the first time ever we're talking about actually getting money directly into the hands of people and families and workers, which I think is fantastic and makes a lot of sense given all the pressures people are going to have between rent, utility, childcare costs, food costs. I mean, it's just, I know it's piling up. So this will provide at least some relief. I don't know what you're hearing.
We're hearing the same thing, that it is it's real. There is a real desire to put real checks in everyone's hands within the next 2 to 3 weeks. I think the congressman will know more about when and if Congress is acting on that. I assume with the president. I'll offer that, and I think people, we all understand this. Whatever it is, frankly, in the immediacy won't be enough. So to the extent that families, if there are those of means, having a $1,000 check or something, that might not be the most important thing in their checkbook. Giving that to an organization that could perhaps be of help to someone else is something we would certainly encourage. There are a number of us, and I'll be frank. I'm blessed that I'm in a job that will provide me a paycheck, but there are plenty who won't. So those of us who can afford to put those dollars into action, I think is useful, and then certainly there will be businesses that are just not going to be able to survive, and while this will be helpful, it won't be enough. So I do think you're right to say that we're seeing unprecedented moves, that frankly the country is going to have multiple stages of relief. We just know right now that what they're talking about is within 2 to 3 weeks, an actual check, I think $1,000 is what they're talking about. I don't know if there's more than that.
Yeah, I've heard all kinds I wouldn't want to speculate.
Fair enough. So I don't know if we have an update on that.
And a follow-up from Julie on that, anything for small business owners or business owners. I have heard, I've seen different figures floated. There's discussion for what the federal government's calling a phase 3 bill. They've sort of done 2 bills already. This will be the 3rd. Somewhere in the ballpark of $300 to $400 billion in loans for various businesses, and that's I'm not going to go too far into the federal mechanics. That's other people's jobs, but I will say I think we need a combination of individual families. 90+% of our economy are small businesses. Right. Gig workers or self-employed. So I'd be very concerned, frankly, with limited dollars of big bailouts of large industries that frankly have more cash and ability to float that. I'd rather see it go directly to our small businesses, our individual, self-employed and families. So
I agree with you.
we're on the record. There
and
we go. Bipartisanship.
The other we are getting questions about whether or not rent payments have been are required and permitted to be delayed as it relates also to mortgage payments, which we know there's a delay. And I do want to acknowledge and answer. Sandy had a question regarding parks and playgrounds becoming somewhat crowded, and yeah. I don't know what have you made it. Are your parks open, generally speaking? And
our parks are open, but we're encouraging everybody to follow the same social distancing, which I know is difficult.
It is, and it's in some places just isn't happening. So we do want to encourage residents. First of all, we both have tremendous parks. Municipalities have tremendous parks that have enough space.
Right.
Take advantage of the passive park aspects, not so much the playground equipment, but maybe the trails, maybe the wetlands, sort of the natural aspects of those parks, because you'll be able to experience be outside, but not have that, the grouping and sort of that, that interaction that we're discouraging. I know it's hard to keep kids away from a playground, so sort of like with bars and restaurants, the issue was sort of like, well, if you
spring breakers
right, if you keep them open,
bars.
They're going to show up.
Yeah.
So we close them, and that de-incentivizes. So in this case, my suggestion to our families both is, if you're going to choose a park, choose one that doesn't have something that's going to encourage your kids to group up. That's basketball courts. I understand how burdensome this is, but go to those linear parks, trails, walkway.
Yep.
Go to open spaces. Those are a lot easier to kind of navigate and not have your kids congregate. And I guess it is a good point. You referenced it just to remind people that you're not immune to this. I mean, I do think early on messaging was, worry about high risk, and we ought to. But everybody can contract COVID, and first you may have an underlying disease you don't know of that could be triggered by having a sort of a respiratory illness anyway. And we know that young people are obviously needing hospital care and what have you. So hanging out the beach and having parties is just, it's not only irresponsible, it's selfish.
Yep.
Because ultimately what you're doing is denying services to other people who can't weather the storm as easily, and you could potentially be putting people at risk. So it's a selfish act, and we tell people it is an act of selflessness to kind of live by this sort of new order for a while, and we'll get through it. On the issue of rent, I don't know that answer. Do you know the delay in payment of rents?
So I think there's not a clear answer, unfortunately. We've been speaking with landlords and apartment complexes, encouraging them. I know Kingston Mayor Steve Noble encouraged this yesterday, at least in the city, and I know other municipalities are doing the same. The goal with the mortgage savings or the mortgage relief is exactly to address this, so that either individual families or apartment owners should be passing on that relief to their tenants. I mean, we have many tenants in all of our towns that are already under tremendous pressure. So if you are a tenant and you're getting, first just go to your landlord and say, hey, can you help me? And say, hey, I know you're getting relief on the mortgage, so pass that on to us. So know that. If you're still having problems, you can give us a call. We'll do our best. I mean, ultimately, at this point, it's going to have to be resolved really between you and the landlord, unfortunately. I could eventually see that changing if there's some federal or state, probably federal money to help backstop that, but right now,
I mean, you have to imagine that if you're delaying payments, no matter what they are, you're not going to be in a position 60, 90, 180 days from now to suddenly magically
pay it all.
So I would imagine that the federal and state government, as they look at what we'll call a bailout, but a stimulus or whatever the term will be when they get to it, lifeline, probably more of a lifeline, they'll have to, and we'll certainly articulate that they have to consider those sorts of things. So whether it's sort of waiver or delays, even consistent delays of payments, there's got to be that relief over a period of time. The spigot's not going to turn back on in 60, 90 days.
Right.
We're going to have to slowly grow our way out of it. And by the way, lessons from the Depression and World War II are good. I mean, looking back to how we recovered there and used government in many ways as the hometown of that particular. I might as well. I mean, listen, partisanship and politics aside, what President Roosevelt understood at the time was that the private sector wasn't going to be able to and prop up the economy. So the federal government had to step in. The good news is, and I think I can say this without it being partisan at all, the underpinnings of our economy, at least the sort of the bigger end of the economy, the Wall Street and major employers, it was stable going into this. So at the very least, we're hopeful that larger employers, can weather the storm, so that we're not necessarily being forced to prop up them, but rather assist the small and medium-sized businesses that clearly are going to be devastated.
That I know.
Is that an accurate way of saying that?
Yeah, that's where my focus is absolutely going to be.
Yeah.
And just so you know, I'm not. I'm checking my phone to get questions. So
yeah, I'm doing the same thing.
Not ignoring Mark or
I'm getting a question regarding the transit system, and why don't I offer what we're doing in Dutchess? I think you're probably seeing something similar, but I don't know that we have an answer regarding the MTA. Although I noticed some schedule adjustments. But as far as public transit in Dutchess County, we began limiting routes. We didn't end them because certainly while things were still open, there's a population that needs them. But now as essential workers are being required to stay, non-essential workers being required to stay home, and businesses are becoming more and more restricted. We're using our transit system, as you are, to move product and resources throughout the community. And we will continue to maintain, and you'll see that at dutchessny.gov, dutchessny.gov, you'll see some additional, limited what I'll say point-to-point routes where we will be open to small numbers of people to allow us simply in populations that need it to move to, I see your brain, you're thinking that's not such
another
a bad idea.
good idea.
I stole yours, you can use that. But we'll use our transit system in a limited way, mostly to do this point-to-point, almost dial-a-ride, sort of call, let us know where you need to go, and we'll start making those decisions on a case-by-case basis. That is not enacted yet, but we expect starting tomorrow, you'll see both those changes in routes, limiting of routes, and a more point-to-point schedule structure.
Yeah, and we have been reducing routes on our UCAT system, but I've had multiple people reach out and say thank you for at least keeping some routes, because that's the only way I can get to the grocery store. That's the only way I can go pick up my prescription. I will say I agree with everything Mark said. This is also where I see the Project Resilience and your similar effort coming in, where if you are homebound and can't get meals or prescriptions, you can surface that need there, and we're setting up those distribution networks so that ultimately less and less people need to move around, but can get those critical needs met while keeping them and everybody else safe. So that's part of the goal of that. I know you need to run in a few, and I know everybody's got stuff going on. Do we want to do one or two more?
Well, let's do a couple more. I just want to also recognize that Orange County Executive Steve Newhouse wanted to be with us today. They have a growing concern regarding cases and caseload that he wanted to stay local. So in fairness to him, I will just acknowledge that he's the only one that didn't want to drive, although for me, this is on my way to Poughkeepsie, and for you, I think you live here. I don't know if there's is there a cot in
I live closer to I'm about the same distance to Poughkeepsie.
Yeah, that's
I have mostly been living here.
I did want to acknowledge Steve Newhouse wanted to join us, and of course we're all kind of doing the same. Now I will tell you did this earlier. The reason I'm leaving shortly is that at 1 p.m. today, Dutchess County is hosting a small business and employers telephone town hall, mostly to give answers to the questions we have answers to, but to compile questions.
Right, to hear what the challenges are.
Yeah. So
I think that's important, because I know I'm feeding, and I'm sure you are, that to our state leaders and our federal leaders. It's really helpful and necessary to hear from you all specific challenges you're having as a business owner, as someone who is home and feeling the pressure here or there. That way we can try to feed that up and hopefully make better policy decisions as they're figuring out what the impacts are. Are we getting any?
I don't have an additional question here. If you have one you want to get to.
There's a few that were in the queue here. So we've gotten a lot of questions about. Here's a good one. So from Catherine, what are you doing to support the elderly and disabled residents? If caregivers fall sick, is there a plan for people to check in on them? These residents could be left without food or the inability to make food, take their meds, do their daily skills. We need to be concerned about those, especially in our more rural areas.
Sure. So in our case, Dutchess County's Office for the Aging has been compiling not only the list of folks we already knew that seniors that needed care, but that list grows daily. Visit dutchessny.gov. If you need to be added to that list and can, certainly we'll do that. So Office for the Aging for us has been preparing meals, most of which are frozen several days at a time. We deliver them with volunteers, and again, if you want to volunteer, dutchessny.gov. Our Medical Reserve Corps is a fairly broad volunteer network that's been active not only in our hotline but also volunteering to distribute. Number one for seniors, that's really our route. So using OFA, we continue to expand that reach, and by delivering the meals, we're also checking in.
Yep.
For those that live with intellectual or developmental disabilities, and of course, we both care about this, but that's sort of a personal concern for me. We're using the same system. So if you basically know of someone that does need some additional attention, we need you to visit our website. We need you to sign up for that acknowledgement. And using volunteers, we're checking in by phone, and if necessary, we're checking in person. But the Dutchess Responds effort is again, we sort of refer to it as a hub and spoke model, right, which is where we're stockpiling what we can in a single location, and using Community Action Partnership, Dutchess Outreach, and others, we're delivering food and product to those points throughout the community. In our case, Eastern Dutchess, Northern Dutchess, more rural, but throughout the county. And then we have volunteer groups that are then distributing from there.
Yep. And yeah, we're doing a very similar thing with Project Resilience, where we're collecting the needs sort of centrally, but also hearing them via, you can go online, but also we've had actually people calling into our COVID hotline because they don't have internet access, which I know many people don't, and then we can even enter it in the form for you. And,
right,
and our Ulster County COVID hotline is 845-443-8888. That's staffed from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 days a week. So if you have need, just raise your hand, or even call a neighbor and have them fill out the form for you.
That's important too. I have an older gentleman who lives across the street, and it occurred to me that he didn't have my phone number.
Yeah.
I mean, we see each other every day, but
right,
he never once. So
check
those,
on your
and even just post it on the mailbox if you don't want to necessarily knock on the door and interrupt, but that neighbor connection, not just for the sense of community, but could be very helpful. So yes, you can call in, visit on behalf of a neighbor, and you can even ask us through our COVID hotline at 845-486-3555 to get some guidance as to what's the best approach in order to check in. You may not want to go rushing to the door, certainly, but there's there's steps that you can take, and we'll give you some guidance. To that end, as it relates to those living with disabilities, again, our system supports that structure similar to seniors. But on April the 2nd, and I know you're ahead of me on the number of town halls and live calls that you've been taking, but we're doing our second telephone town hall, a live telephone town hall in Dutchess County on April the 2nd. We are doing live activity. You're doing it daily. We're doing you'll get a regular update on Dutchess County's website and Facebook page, but every Wednesday you'll get a live update where we can interact. And our next telephone town hall on April the 2nd, we will talk specifically about ideas and guidance for those living with developmental and intellectual disabilities, with a focus on younger people in particular, or really anyone with sensory issues like autism spectrum disorders, to kind of talk through social storytelling and sort of the resources that are available. I know that seems like it's light years away, but in 2 weeks we'll have that up and running for folks. Yeah, and there'll be resources, and there are resources at Think Differently online. So if you go to thinkdifferently.net, and by the way, anybody anywhere, our resources are open in that regard. Thinkdifferently.net, you'll see some resources that exist, some direction on maybe how you can communicate this with individuals with disabilities, and the mechanism in Dutchess to reach back to us if you have a particular need.
And I got to say,
it took a lot of time.
No. I mean, your leadership on those sets of issues, to my knowledge, nationally is
Thank you.
Unprecedented. So we'll be sharing that and using that. And,
please do. Yeah. And I would say online, I think what we should attempt to do one of these days is, perhaps if we're doing these multiple telephone town halls, perhaps we just do a joint one, Ulster Dutchess, and then even great. Steve Newhouse can participate.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. He is poor guy. He's also.
I mean,
in
he's
the
a
guard.
Navy guy.
Yeah,
So,
I know. We've kind of talked
not
about this. I don't want to say anything. I mean, they set us up, right? They set up for the Army to move in. We are getting a question from Johanna that asked about support for homelessness and those who are homeless. I mentioned this today. Earlier last week, I instructed with the sheriff's office to convert what are temporary housing units we had at the former Dutchess County Jail, several hundred bed capacity units, units, and with Mental Health America, Hudson River Housing, and Dutchess Outreach, we've been converting them now into a 24/7 shelter that opens today. The reason that we're doing that is that some of these services, by nature of how we provide them, are decentralized. Under this situation, we need
have
them.
to.
Yeah, so centralized, 29 North Hamilton, I think, is the address in Poughkeepsie for those who are homeless. We're also going to be doing regular checks, just as we would for Code Blue, going out into the community, identifying those who might need resources and support, and you can go to the new 24/7 shelter in the city of Poughkeepsie, and we'll have support there.
And we're not there yet, but I think we're emulating you, and spoke with our team about this today. So, but right now, those who are without a place to be safely and warmly, we do have multiple shelters up and running and accepting those who are homeless or in need. You can call our Ulster County COVID hotline or call on the behalf of someone else. Again, 845-443-8888. Let's want to do some closing, and then we'll let everybody move on there.
Yeah. Well, first, I mean, I commend you. You have the resources have been great. In fact, I've gotten information through your live town halls that I'm able to share. So it's not just it depends on who's on which call when. Now, we've made a profession these days of being on conference calls. So we're constantly being fed information, and any means we can communicate that, I think, is important. I just want to remind folks in Dutchess County, again, visit dutchessny.gov or call us at 845-486-3555 to get updated information. And I think this is an important time to, I'll say two last things, and that is just to remind people, the tools we have to communicate are invaluable, but they can also communicate false or alarmist information that isn't always accurate. We should use those tools, but try to make sure that the information you get is sourced. And I know in both of our cases, what we push out is either sourced through our own resources or CDC, World Health Organization, federal or state authorities. It's just important that we share calm, consistent information. For us, if you are in need, visiting the website and calling that number is critically important. And then I'll just say this, and I don't know. I think at times I'm turning a bit into a pastor, but irrespective of faith, this is one of those moments where we're fighting a battle that we can't see. Certainly, we don't necessarily understand it, and it's okay to feel the way you feel. If that's anxiety, if that's stress, if that's anger, it is entirely appropriate to feel those emotions. How you channel that is important. So I will tell you, in our case, you should feel free to visit the Dutchess County Helpline, 485-9700, 845-485-9700, 24/7 professionals who can assist with mental health and mental wellness concerns, but also use this opportunity, I think, to create those connections that we seem to have lost in an interconnected world. And just know that you have, as an individual, the power to assist others, meaning even if it's just that calm word, even if it's just going online through social media and doing 30 seconds of meditation, whatever it is that you have that skill set to do, I try to do it because will be people in your trusted circle who need you to do that. And then we're here to provide some support as well.
Yeah.
As you can go in peace.
Wise. I don't
know about always. I just feel like I'm getting old rapidly.
We're both in this moment of dealing with very immediate. How do we get up mobile testing? How do we get more surge hospital capacity? But there's also almost a meta level that I think a lot of people are thinking and reflecting on. And I want to thank you for being here and your partnership and the teamwork we have, and Steve Newhouse as well. One real kind of practical thing, and then just two closing thoughts. Practically, I know in both of our counties, a lot of people are just wanting more information on the mobile testing. We're going to be rolling that out as soon as we can. This is a complex kind of an operation that includes security concerns. How do we get people queued up properly? How do we make sure those with greatest need are being tested? How do we keep our healthcare workers safe and those being tested? So we're working all of that. I know our teams are working together on this.
And managing expectations.
Yes. So as soon as we have that, we will share it with everybody. But just know we don't want to rush to failure. We want to do it the right way. So that's more to come on that, probably realistically over the weekend as we have more detail. And then my two meta thoughts for the day. One is they're both cliches, but I think they're relevant. One is we're in this together. And I think that can be applied from all different angles. But I'm just really proud of how everybody in our community has stepped up and taken that approach. Whether it's just reaching out to your neighbor, volunteering, contributing to our various relief efforts, it's just it warms my heart that I know this, our country has this spirit, and to see it coming is powerful. And then the second mantra I heard today on some coverage out of another area, in their operations center, they had this sign up that said, "We've got this." And I think that's what the mantra that we feel I know for my team. We don't have every detail figured out, but I am confident that we've got this in terms of standing up resources that we never thought we'd have to stand up in less than a week, in building new systems and ways to communicate. So trust that we're working hard. We don't have everything figured out, but I know we're going to be able to weather this, and we've got it. So unless you got anything to add.
It's your show.
It's not a show, that's for sure. But thanks for everybody tuning in, and if you have ideas, keep them coming, and questions, and we'll share everything we know when we know it. Thank you, Radio Kingston. Another
Tivolian. Tivolian, right?
That's
there.
right. That's
Former
right.
Tivolian.
We've stolen him to Ulster County.
That's okay.
So we're
Actually,
glad.
knowing him as well as I do, you can have him. No.
Wow.
No.
All right.
Good.
Well, thanks everybody. Hang in there, and we'll speak with you soon.